Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany. My name is Reverend Sam Trumbore and I serve as the minister of this congregation. I have these words to open our service. We gather this morning in our little separate Zoom boxes again, with spiky little viruses out there threatening us, lurking in elevators, cashier lines, restaurants, bars. I get it. We're just tired of it. Tired of the mask swabbing our noses, the cancellations, the changes of plans. This fierce Omicron virus is just wearing us out. I get it. Just when we need each other's comfort and touch, keeping our distance takes priority, takes that closeness away from us. The weather has turned cold and today icy, interfering with us meeting outside. Outdoor dining is out of the question. I get it. The joy of being here in Community Hall is out of reach today. But seeing and hearing each other in our Zoom boxes, talking with each other in small groups, in breakout rooms, exchanging greetings, joys, and sorrows are not. Have no fear. This too shall pass. Better days are ahead. And this congregation is adapting and striving to help see you through as we join together today in the celebration of life. Our prelude this morning is The Entertainer by Scott Joplin, and Isaac Allen is our performer. Thank you. And let us light our chalice this morning, as Peggy Sherman will do. And we have the words on our screen to read together. Welcoming all free seekers of truth and meaning, we gather to excite the spirit, to inspire its growth and development, to respond morally and ethically to a troubled world, and to sustain a vital and nurturing religious community. And we have a chance for us to sing at home for you. When Israel was in Egypt's land, an African-American spiritual, and our song leader is Randy Rosette.
Catching Thoughts by Bonnie Clark, illustrated by Summer Macon. I have this thought I don't like. It showed up on a bad day. At first it was really no big deal, just a teeny tiny little thought. But after a while, the thought followed me everywhere I went. It tripped me up when I wasn't expecting it. I tried to unthink my unwanted thought, but that just made me think about it more. This thought made me angry, so I yelled, Get out of my brain. It stayed. I sat down and cried. It didn't care. It seemed like there was no more room in my head for anything but the one horrible thought. I had to do something. I took a deep breath and looked at it. Maybe it wasn't so big. I smiled and said, "Hello." That's when I noticed it. It was small, but it was beautiful. I reached up and caught it. This beautiful thought gave me an idea. I turned to that old thought and grinned. From now on, I'll be catching new thoughts. And then I gently pushed the old thought aside. I grabbed onto thoughts that were hopeful and gathered up thoughts that were lovely. I held on tight to thoughts that were true and embraced thoughts that were excellent. I danced with thoughts of pure joy. I collected thoughts that were clear and calm. I realized that the more positive thoughts I caught, the smaller that old negative thoughts became. And whenever that old thought tries to come back into view, I can just say hello and politely ask it to leave and fill my world with all the good thoughts that I choose to put in my mind instead.
And welcome to our Facebook viewers. Again, you've joined the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany for our service. And my name is Sam Trumbore, and I serve as minister of this congregation. I have a reading for you this morning. It comes from Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, which I'm going to be referring to today. Psychologists Maureen Craig and Jennifer Richardson presented white Americans with news articles about people of color becoming the majority of the population by 2042. The study authors then asked the subjects to indicate their agreement with the idea that increases in racial minority status will reduce white American status. The people who agreed most strongly with the demographic changes that it threatened white status were most susceptible to shifting their policy views because of it. Even on race-neutral policies like raising the minimum wage and expanding health care and even drilling in the Arctic. The authors concluded that making the changing national racial demographics salient, while white Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, led them to endorse conservative policy positions more strongly. This was a dramatic finding, but it still wasn't clear to me, that's Heather, why people would view the presence of more people of color as a threat to their status, as if racial groups were in a direct competition, where progress for one group was an automatic threat to another. But then again, They weren't getting that idea out of nowhere. This zero-sum paradigm was the default framework for conservative media, with expressions like makers and takers, taxpayers and freeloaders, handouts and special favors. They're coming after your job, your safety, your way of life. Without the hostile intent, of course, we aren't all talking about race relations through the prism of competition. Every advantage for one group mirrored by a disadvantage for another. When researching and writing about disparities, I was taught to focus on how white people benefited from systemic racism. Their schools have more funding, they have less contact with the police, they have greater access to health care. Those of us seeking to unify told that version of the zero-sum story. The politicians seeking division told the other version. Is it any wonder that many white people saw race relations through the lens of competition? But is that the real story? Black people and other people of color certainly lost out when they weren't able to invest during the aftermath of the Great Recession, or tackle climate change more forcefully under President Obama, or address household debt crisis before it spiraled out of control. In each case, at least partially because of racist stereotypes and dog whistles used by our opposition. But did white people win? No. For the most part, they lost right along with the rest of us. Racism got in the way of all of us having nice things. It is progressive economic conventional wisdom that racism accelerates inequality for communities of color. But what if racism is actually driving inequality for everyone? Here ends the reading. Let us take that question, Heather McGhee's question, inward as a source for meditation. Black people already know on a daily basis the harm they encounter because of racism and the American system of white supremacy. The truth is, any form of hatred causes harm. It causes harm to everyone, whether they are active or passive participants. Unless you are actively interrupting the system of white supremacy, you are a cooperating part of that system. You are a participant, enabling the harm of others and being morally, spiritually, and emotionally harmed too. The system operates to hide this truth and distract you from the harm being done by you, through you, to you. Unless you are Black or a person of color, and then the system wants you to know, to feel the harm. So you'll be afraid, stay in line, and remain silent. This status quo system of oppression thrives on lies and secrecy, on silence and inaction. May we uncover the lies, reveal the secrets, speak truth into the silence, and act in solidarity for the good of all. Let us take these thoughts, reflections, and our own prayers and meditations into a time of silence, silent meditation. This has been a sobering week with COVID cases keeping spiraling up in an exponential pattern. And then we're also remembering the invasion of the nation's capital during the joint session of Congress to certify the presidential election a year ago on Thursday. Our previous president's unwillingness to accept defeat and the dense web of lies he put together to defend his self-image as a winner, and the bulk of the Republican Party willing to go along with his totalitarian undermining of democratic principles for their own political survival, are putting the whole system of government at risk. All in the service of zero-sum thinking. There are winners and losers. You are either a winner or a loser. We win when we elevate one leader and loyally follow. This has been the Republican strategy that was crafted by Newt Gingrich back in the 1990s to unify Republicans as a bloc that only voted together. No independent debate, only loyalty mattered. It was us or them. Our previous president was a master of this kind of aggressive thinking to denigrate and dehumanize the other. This is the opposite of what Unitarian Universalism is all about. We cherish diversity and inclusion. We welcome everyone. We are not about one way or following one person. We believe that we can be stronger, more caring, more creative, more joyful by listening expansively to each other, by being willing to be changed by each other, and by a commitment to lifelong growth and development as individuals and as a congregation. What is lost in zero-sum win-lose thinking is the possibility that our differences can be resolved through discussion, negotiation, and compromise that can result in a win-win solution where everybody gets what they want. Rather than seeing life as a competition, the survival of the fittest and the extinction of the weak, there is another way that succeeds through cooperation and mutual self-interest. It is a grave error to interpret evolution as the competition of all against all. The species that survive and thrive are the ones that learn how to cooperate and share. The cells that merge to create multicellular organisms are stronger together than they are apart. I think a lot about how to transform zero-sum thinking, because we are not immune to that kind of thinking here. It's very easy to fall into. In the middle of the 20th century, our congregations were riven with the humanist-theist controversy. The dualistic approach to belief in God or rejection of belief in God comes to a height on Sunday morning with the theological language we use that is either theistic or atheistic. I have spent a lifetime carefully crafting my language to affirm both these contributions to the diversity of belief and unbelief in our congregations, seeing that diversity as a strength rather than a zero-sum competition. I live it with a deep love of God, but rejecting the belief in God and feeling the benefit of being able to draw from both worlds without rejecting either. Where I am always looking for ways out of zero-sum thinking in our congregation and in society at large is around the issue of race. For way, way too many people who categorize themselves as white, they engage non-whites through this zero-sum thinking. So when I heard about the new book by Heather McGhee titled "The Sum of Us: What Racism Cost Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together," I was immediately attracted to it. Racism grounded in zero-sum thinking misses the tremendous unrealized potential of our nation to show the world the win-win results of a pluralistic approach. It is also the tremendous yet unrealized potential of Unitarian Universalism for religion. McGhee builds her credibility to make this argument by writing and talking publicly about her love of numbers and statistical analysis. She isn't looking for ideological arguments to beat people over the head. She wants to know what the data says. She is grounded in the real world, not in dreams of how things ought to be. She wants to prove her case by using real-world examples of what happens when people come together across race and class lines and work together for the common good. I can't bring you the full power of her arguments in just one service. Probably can't even do it in two. So today, I'll talk about the problem of zero-sum thinking, and next Sunday, I'll present McGhee's research on the sum of us approach that unlocks the power of diversity and inclusion. Let's begin by defining the zero-sum thinking problem with a timely example. My sister and I would gleefully open our presents we discovered on Christmas morning under our attractively decorated, freshly cut tree adorned with bubble lights. Once all the presents were opened, we would line our gifts up and compare them. We were looking for favoritism. If one of us got more or better gifts than the other, it was a sign that one parent or the other, or maybe both, liked one of us better than the other. We rejected the idea that we could be loved equally, which my parents constantly told us. It was a competition, and only one of us could win. Zero-sum thinking is rooted in the belief that there is a limited supply. If someone gets more, that will mean I will get less, or be at risk of losing something valuable. There are only winners and losers. Your gain is my loss. My sister and I were playing one dimension of that thinking. Parents do have favorite children, so my sister and I were always alert to see if my father or my mother paid more attention to one of us than the other. I could tell that my sister was my dad's favorite. As she went into science and academics, my father is a university professor. I had the edge with my mom because we both had health issues, and so we could empathetically connect. My parents claim that they loved us equally, just didn't align with our childish thinking. Zero-sum thinking becomes quite dangerous when it's practiced by groups of people against other groups of people. It becomes toxic, racist thinking if the groups become categories of people with physical traits. While individuals can compete with other individuals with limited effects, when categories of people organize to control or oppress other people, tremendous damage can be done. The problem with zero-sum thinking is the scarcity frame. As children, my sister and I believed that my parents could only express a limited amount of love. If my sister got more, I got less. It was a false understanding of love. My parents had the capacity for an abundance of love and care for both of us with more than we could ever need or want. We each got enough, and there was plenty left over for their friends and other relatives, for that matter. There was enough love of our community for my mother to run for state legislature, wearing out several pairs of shoes, going door to door, campaigning to find out what the needs of people in our community were. European elites brought that zero-sum frame with them to America in the 1600s, wanting to build a new life for themselves. They didn't see us as they encountered indigenous people. What they saw instead of people was the land to exploit for profit. They didn't see Africans brought to work the land as potential collaborators in making the land agriculturally productive. They dehumanized them as an underclass of permanently enslaved people, reduced to the cost on a balance sheet. They didn't sense affinity with the poor Europeans who had come before to work the land. In their minds, these folks would occupy a buffer class, defined as white and given social status and privilege that separated them from Black. And Americanized racism was born and took deep root in this land. For group identity and social status trumps collective economic opportunity and interracial cooperation just about every time, much to author Heather McGhee's distress. McGhee's book does an excellent job of demonstrating how racism is deeply reinforced by zero-sum thinking to the detriment of whites. This is so important because most white people who identify as white have no clue how they are harming themselves by cooperating with the ubiquitous white supremacy culture all around us. They believe they are better off. What they don't recognize is the poverty that they have created for themselves by zero-sum thinking. Investment in public goods such as education, health care, and public transit have been in decline for a long time. It comes under the guise of rejecting big government often, but that doesn't tell the full story. The decline in public investment tracks the gradual increase in access to those goods by people categorized as non-white. That's because for most of America's history as a nation, the beneficiaries of America's free public investments were whites only. One glaring illustration of this McGhee features in her work is the decline of public pools. From the beginning of the 20th century, Americans started building public pools. Towns and cities competed to build bigger ones. In the 1930s, Works Progress Administration built hundreds more. By World War II, the country's 2,000 pools were glittering symbols of the new commitment by local officials to the quality of life of its residents. allowing hundreds of thousands of people to socialize together for free. Officials envisioned the distinctly American phenomenon of the grand public resort pools as social melting pots. Like free public grade schools, public pools were part of an Americanizing project intended to overcome ethnic divisions and cohere a common identity. And it worked. Those divisions they wanted to overcome, unfortunately, didn't include skin color. The fight to integrate pools in the 1950s brought out strong racist energy of resistance. The courts said pools should be integrated. The reaction by whites was horrific. As if Black children who dared to enter a pool had contaminated them with a toxic chemical. Rather than share pools, cities and towns across the country drained them, filled them in, and in some cases, paved them over and turned them into parking lots or fields to grow grass. People started building them in their backyards, and private exclusionary clubs formed to build pools so they could keep them segregated. Non-wealthy whites were left to suffer the hot summers without refreshing public spaces of free public pools, yet they supported their elimination. Their segregated white identity was far more important than the public pool to enjoy. Where most working class folks who identify as white might see the greatest benefit from cross-racial affiliation is unionization. Industrialists have long attempted to break strikes by recruiting Black, Hispanic, and immigrant workers to cross picket lines. Early union organizers recognized that they had to bring everyone together to build the solidarity needed to hold out long enough to cause enough pain to the owners to get them to negotiate in good faith. McGhee researched efforts to organize a union at a Nissan plant in Mississippi. The workers had many grievances that could bring them together. But the biggest barrier to the union was race. The perception of the white workers was that this would benefit Black workers. And if they were going to benefit, then the white workers wouldn't support it. Racial identity was far more important to them than the potential benefits that they might gain through unionization. The union effort failed by just a few hundred votes. Race was a key factor in that defeat, because if the Blacks were for it, the whites would vote against it. Zero-sum choice. McGhee's book is an inventory of the zero-sum losses for white folks who vote against their economic, health, and social best interests. For what? To be able to identify with rich capitalists like our former president. The real elites who deftly feed their illusions of white identity and superiority, even as the non-rich whites' well-being steadily decreases. And there's always the transference of blame from the real agents of their misery, the wealthy elites, to the discriminated against and oppressed at the bottom, especially blacks. It doesn't have to be this way. There's another story to tell. There is a story of many benefits of social solidarity that crosses lines of race and class. When I speak about dismantling white supremacy culture, this is the social benefit I'm after. Dismantling these false zero-sum impulses and replacing them with some of us approaches and attitudes has the potential to unlock the greatness of the American vision. The ideals of a pluralistic nation of unlimited opportunity and equal justice remains the unrealized dream of this nation. Next week, I'll tell that story, a story lifted up by the ones who have suffered the most deprivation. We will honor that dream of who America can be and has yet to realize. So be it.
Good morning. I'm Peggy Sherman, and I'm your service associate today. An important way we celebrate life each Sunday is by offering an opportunity to practice generosity. Members and friends support our congregation with an annual pledge paid throughout the year. Another way to support the good work of this congregation is by making a generous contribution via one of the options shown on this next slide. You can click on the tiny URL link in the chat window to contribute, or you can send a text to the number shown on the screen. The examples on the slide show how to label your text to indicate the amount and the purpose or intent of your gift. We now say goodbye to our Facebook viewers. Consider joining us on Zoom next time. You can find more information at albanyuu.org. And our offertory music is Satin Doll by Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn, with words by Johnny Mercer, performed by Randy Rosette.
Cigarette holder, which wigs me over his shoulder. He digs me out catching that satin doll. I'm madden my satin doll. Yeah.
We enjoy welcoming guests and visitors to our service. If you'd like to tell us who you are and where you're from, you can click on the raise hand symbol. Depending on your Zoom version, you'll find
Collectively, for all the joys and sorrows that have been spoken, but also for the joys and sorrows that have been unspoken, may we hold all that we've heard and felt in our hearts. And our prayer of affirmation comes from Margalie Belazar, minister now in Orlando, Florida. Prayer for while in the struggle. Let us turn inward to receive these words. Spirit of light and love, spirit of resistance, spirit of generosity, that which serves as our conscience in this work that we do to dismantle white supremacy, to empower the marginalized, to insist that Black lives matter. We have been angered, we have been saddened, we have been pushed to the brink again and again. Again, we are inspired and resolved to do better, to not simply get to the other side of the moment, but to get there morally healthier, to get to a safer place for Black bodies. Spirit, help us to understand that we each have a role in justice work, for our liberations are tied to one another. Give us the clarity of mind to know our individual part in this struggle, that there are many ways to protest injustice. Help us to find our way and commit to it. Spirit of life and love, we ask for guidance. Send us strength and endurance. Help us to give our all to this and to hold nothing back. For precious lives depend on it. We will be imperfect. Rest assured that we will mess up over and over again. And we must do it anyway. May we summon the courage to tear down this system of injustice and get busy creating a world community with justice for all. May it be so. And amen. And our musical interlude to sit with those words and move into a more celebrative place. I'm Just Wild About Harry. Composer and musician, U.B. Blake.
As we extinguish the chalice, please join in the words shown on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And we have this prayer for living intention by Joseph M. Cherry. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving. And we want to thank today's musicians, Isaac Allen and Randy Rosette, our ushers, Kristen Abbas and Annika Pfluger. Annie Lipinski was our pastoral care associate. I'm your service associate. Our welcomer was Elizabeth Berberian. Office support is provided by Tammy Goddard Hathaway and Patience Pichette. Technical support by Chris Jensen and Fred Eames. Flowers. You can fill our empty spot and donate flowers for a Sunday service. Email the church office to find out how. admin@albanyuu.org. And if anyone wishes to make a live announcement at this time, please click on the raise hand symbol and the technician will cue you. In the meantime, we have these announcements. We have an opportunity for a creative, fun-loving individual to join our team as our lead youth group advisor. If you know of anyone who might be interested, please share this with them. Contact Acting DRE Elizabeth Valdez with inquiries. Today, after the service, a ministry and operations team and leaders creative budget meeting will take place here on the Zoom service link at 12 noon. And the Walker Book Group meets virtually tonight at 6:30 p.m. Check our website for more information.